We have a little bit more of the brain that we need to talk about a little bit here. And we've already discussed the amygdala, where a rapid response, a fear or flight type response could occur. But there's also a internal portion of the brain. You'll see it right here by this orange area indicated part of the brain where emotions are handled. In fact, this part of the brain is called the limbic system, and some would call it the emotional brain. It's where emotions are processed. The inner part of the brain, as we've evolved, some call it the inner brain, is just the basic functions, although it performs them very well, the brain does in the central nervous system, and very efficiently. They're lower on the evolutionary cycle. And the outer part of the brain here is where cognition is handled, deeper thought processes, rocket science, and the like. But this limbic system, this emotional brain, that is the orange area, we're going to dive into a little bit deeper because it controls these things called emotions, which are very critical to emotional intelligence. You can see a little more details of the limbic system here, the emotional brain. It's underneath, if we were looking at sort of the brain and the central nervous system, the brain stem here, this being the brain, you'll see the lobes, frontal, temporal lobes, and etc. If you could peel those back a little bit or sneak inside of them, you'd see a variety of gyrus-type setups, hippocampus, and there's the amygdala, you can see right there. This entire group of the thalamus, variety of gyruses, and the amygdala, as well as the hippocampus, beneath this temporal lobe, this frontal lobe, is what's called this limbic system. And again, it's the emotional brain. So that kind of gives you a little tighter feel. So inherent in emotional intelligence and using leadership is that our emotions and how we regulate them, in fact, how we interact through social intelligence, not only for ourselves but with others, the intra and the interpersonal intelligences that got us all started here. The emotions are in fact contagious, and they're contagious to those around us, and the emotions of others are contagious to us. So there's actual chemical processes that occur here that I'll talk about in just a minute, but our brain has the capacity to pick these up in a system and to give these off in a system, and we can in essence interconnect with other people that way. Resonance is the ability to resonate, to be at one, to be at the same page, to share excitement or share anger with somebody and them with us, vice versa. So we have the capacity, if we can regulate our limbic system, to make a resonance, to resonate with someone else in a positive way, or in a negative way. And this is the theory behind all of this. We're wired to pick up clues from another person, and they are wired to pick them up from us. So leadership with emotional intelligence is how to regulate, how to revise our emotions, such that we build a very positive, very powerful 1 and 1 becomes 3 type phenomena moving forward. So whether you're receiving or giving off subtle clues and they're being processed in your limbic system, and whether those clues are negative or positive, one of the other type things are occurring that have immediate and long-term impacts. One of the other of 2 types of biochemical processes are occurring. If you're receiving stress, what's happening is you're activating what's called this SNS system, the sympathetic nervous system. And you have secretions of a variety of endocrines as part of the endocrines system. And as a result, your pulse rate and your blood pressure actually increasing. Your breathing gets faster and more shallow. If it's chronic, an annoying stress continually, it can have significant impact on your cognitive, your perception, and your emotional well-being. If, however, you activate the renewal to your system, positive is the parasympathetic nervous system, and in that there's secretions of hormones into your nervous system, and at their dosage levels, they can trigger things such as you feel warmer, your blood pressure and pulse rate drop, your breathing slows down, it gets deeper. You engage your immune system to its fullest capacity. So it's this process of renewal and stress. If it's chronic, you get burnout. And emotional intelligences and social engagement, the intra and interpersonal capacity to deal with this has a profound impact to your leadership potential using emotional intelligences. It's fascinating that this renewal process, it is postulated in much of the literature that through your average day, you really want 3 of these for every one of these. So it's a 3-to-1 ratio of PNS to the SNS. So you need to try to calculate as much of that as possible and deal with that and cause actions that cause this ratio. You need 3 times the number of renewal activities. And while sleep is renewal, that's not what I'm talking about here per se. I'm talking about being a positive frame of mind, give off positive type subtle clues at a ratio compared to negative at a ratio of about 3-to-1. So when your limbic system, your emotional brain, is giving off this higher ratios, you're getting into higher ratios of PNS to SNS, the parasympathetic nervous system to the sympathetic nervous system, the renewal to your stress. You get into this limbic resonance, and limbic resonance is the theory that we as humans have the capacity to help others and help ourselves, the intra and interpersonal, to in fact reach a more resonance, a more resonating type of a social intelligence and emotional intelligence. We can regulate it, we can revise it, and in other words, we have more empathy. We have a more nonverbal, and it can be verbal, connection that develops our social connections and gets us all working as a stronger team, charging towards a more visionary approach. So there's biochemical, neurological backing to this whole theory of these intelligences, of emotional intelligence and interacting with others in a social intelligence kind of framework. And that is sort of the essence from the neurological, neurobiological, and biochemical aspect of leading through emotional intelligence. As we transition out of the neurological and biochemical aspects of this process of invoking intra and interpersonal intelligences, there's 2 more terms that I want to sort of point out in the whole research and the theory behind all of this, specifically this positive emotional attractor and negative emotional attractor. They subdivide these a little bit, a PEA and an NEA, positive emotional attractors and negative. And in there you're going to see, hey, if you want a relationship that's resonant, you're going to want to be more positive. If you want a relationship that is dissonant, you're going to be triggering negative emotional attractors, NEAs and PEAs. But there's PNS arousal in positive, and there's SNS arousal in negative. The effect is, are you positive or are you negative? Are you giving off, and are you receiving positive or negative retractors? And we're going to get into the psychology a little bit in terms of the ideal self versus the ought self, and we'll talk about that, ideal and real strengths, the way you view it at a very analytical standpoint is what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, what are my positive, what are my negatives, the ideal, what's my hope, what are my dreams. Those are more positive kinds of thinking processes. More negative, or what are the expectations, what's my fear, those are more negative. And again, you want to try to have this 3-to-1 ratio for your own health as well as the health of others. So we're going to get into this a little bit deeper, learning agenda, things like I'm excited about trying versus here's my improvement plan. Those are negative emotional attractors. So as we progress in the course here a little bit, now having covered the neurobiological, biochemical, and we start getting into the psychological and some things we can do from a practice standpoint that have been identified as important for leading through emotional intelligences.